Ah, boards, games, board games. We might be talking about board games, but I'm not gonna shout. I am starting off this streaming with a bit of pointing at Jess, who's over there. Today, what does Jess wear? Jess is wearing a
Blue.
blue shirt. And now I'll talk about the topic, and that wouldn't hurt. The topic is hello, good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is wherever you are. Time for Betty Keats and Board Games Leather, episode 922. And the topic, which I said I'd talk about, is prioritization. What should we be doing? And I put this in inverted commas because I hate the word should. I think that sometimes there's a lot of societal pressure to say you should do this, and sometimes it's important to think, well, why? Is it really an obligation that I have to others? Is it really something that will behoove myself? Is it something that will improve my own life or the state of being for others? Or is it just something that we are expected to do without considering it? And I think that's what this show hopefully will be all about making that analysis of what really is the best thing to do. And once you've made that choice, about having the willpower to execute on it. So,
To actually move forward and say these things need to be done and these things not so much.
mm-mm-mm. How do you feel about this topic? I have to say, Jess, I'm feeling a wee bit intimidated. I mean, who are we to give this, advice?
I feel a bit non-expert, but then so does everybody. This is the sort of thing where it can be so different for everybody. You go, okay, right, there are all these things that you have to do, and some of them need to be done, and some of them don't. And this feels like a very universal topic, but it also feels like one where there is no one answer. So it's a
Mm-mm-mm.
problem everybody has, but there isn't actually, well, there may be little solutions, but it's a coping mechanism. Something
Yeah,
with no proper cure. That's what it is.
I mean, when you talk about universal solutions, I want
Mm,
to say that even when it comes to board game design, even when it comes to
mm,
something with more of a craft, I think that often I like to remind people that what works for me might not work for you, and what works for this super successful designer, what works for Elizabeth
mhm.
Hargrave, might not work for me. And I think that's really important to remember that everyone's on their own journey, but at the same time, maybe some of the things that we say might help. So I think that's maybe a way to start, just talking about stories and what's worked for us, what's
Mm.
not worked for us. But before we get into all of that, let's have a regular discussion of not
Yay.
just recent highlights, but also recent events. Recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights. Recent highlights, playing games and other delights. Recent highlights. So, would you like to go first?
Recent highlights. Oh, I'm just thinking highlights things. Well, I made a really good cake the other day. It was very tasty.
Nice.
Not board game related, although have you seen that on Twitter, Cake of Doom, which is a game coming
Hmm.
out soon, there have been various people making cakes and sending the pictures in to Cake of Doom. Cake of Doom is a great card game, by the way.
Have you played
So
it?
I have. I've play tested it a few times. I am pretty certain that I've played the final version, but I certainly play tested it several times, and cakes are fun. Everyone likes cake.
Yeah. Hello, Mike. And Mike says, I came for the cake, and I'm sorry if I'm
Yeah.
getting. I never. I have to admit, sometimes when I know people's personal names, I mean, I assume that I get them in a public setting. So please tell me if you would rather I use your Twitch handle or if it's okay. But XXL Black Sheep says, I came for the cake. And yeah, that's totally legit. I've played Cake of Doom at one point in
Mhm.
Juggater myself. I've also hung out with Pearl over
Mm.
um, coffee back when I was on a diet, so I didn't eat any cake. And also, and says, I'm good with whatever.
Mm.
But yes,
Cake.
they are lovely people, Pearl, Amar, and yeah, I wish them all well. And I think that it's really good that they've been able to get the community together. Cake. So yeah.
Cake.
Hello,
Great leveler.
Joseph. Have you had any cake recently? Have you
Cake!
played any board games recently? I'm going to chat about yesterday. I had actually 4 friends over, which was lovely. So it was 2 different groups. First, I had Kerry over in the morning, which is a weekly event, and I asked Kerry, "Are you up for trying my deck construction game?"
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm I was just kind of checking, just in case it was right behind me. But you've already seen it last week. And Kerry said, "Yeah, that sounds fun. I'm always up for playtesting." I think there's also an assumption that I'm not going to show off something that's just the first iteration.
Mm-hmm.
It had already been playtested 10 times and people were enjoying it. So I was really excited to see what Kerry would think. Now, we also played, well, I'll just cut to the chase and say Kerry enjoyed it. I did win. We played with all 60 cards shuffled together because I
Mm-hmm.
was curious about what that first game experience would be like if you don't actually do any deck construction, just play with the whole decks. It seemed to
Mm-hmm.
work okay. My card pool, it's far from perfect, don't get me wrong, but it's a good first attempt. I mean, I say a first attempt, but it's like the 4th time I've done cards, but the first time I've done an actual card pool. Now, at the end of it, I said to Kerry, "Would you be interested in maybe taking it home and doing some deck construction?" And despite having never done it, Kerry seemed really excited by the prospect, which was lovely. So I
Mm-hmm.
think even though it was designed to be a financially accessible deck construction game, I think that my limitation of saying this game, you've got 20 card decks, and 20 card decks are actually viable in this game. And
Mm-hmm.
you've got only 60 cards to choose from. So you can understand everything within an hour rather than having to spend days potentially understanding everything going on. I think that also makes it less intimidating, more of a you can play with everything and then you've got some idea of what to do. And so that was nice. We also played Ticket to Ride London. Have you played this?
So I am
Oh, sorry,
fairly
Ticket to Ride
sure.
New York. I do apologize.
Oh
New
no,
York.
London. I'm fairly sure I have played. New York. I definitely haven't played.
Well, I would say that mm, we both slightly prefer the scoring mechanism of New York
Mm-hmm.
because in New York, it's just, oh, if you go to these places, you get a bonus point if it's connected to any one of your routes. Whereas London, the scoring feels a little bit more awkward. It feels like
Mm-hmm.
it's taking you more away from the general Ticket to Ride ethos of, and I, but for me, both of these games, whilst Kerry prefers the full scale Ticket to Ride, I just love the fact that you can knock these games out in like 10 minutes. And it's like, yeah, do you want to play again? Yeah, sure, we'll play a second time. And that's
Yeah.
lovely. Joseph Kelly suggest, sorry, Joe, Young Gilek is going by Joe now. I played Adel Verplichtet for the first time recently. Great game. I think it's
Mm.
called Hoity Toity as well. Yes, I played that years and years ago. I remember it being a super lovely thing, but I can't remember much about it at all. And great to hear you enjoyed it. I'm also going to share a few pictures very quickly of the um, second thing. So I did then
Oh,
have
cool.
3 friends come over
Mm-hmm.
for a bit of playtesting and dinner. So I watched them, 2 friends, play against each other a couple of times. And even though there are the games sadly seem to go on a little bit longer than I would like. I tried a new rule where I said any card can be also discarded as one resource, which
Mm-hmm.
seemed to work well to get rid of the luck. It's like a luck mitigation factor. Obviously, if you don't have enough
Mm-hmm.
resource cards to start off
Yep.
with, then okay, you can ditch something. But it meant that someone looking at their cards
Mm-hmm.
now is not only looking at saying do I use this half or do I use this half? But do I use it for a resource? So it slowed the game down to the point where the first game was 27 minutes, the second game was 40, and I'm really aiming for 20-30 minutes games here, so a bit more than I'd like. I did play my own deck against one of them, trying to make a deck that totally subverted the game, and it felt like it could be viable with a bit more work, but it wasn't easy to do, which I like the power level of, and obviously that's
photo of
4 of
everyone
us
playing.
together, and that is also Alan's prototype of Serious Smugglers. Serious spelt like the star system, and that's a lovely thing where people are moving. Yeah, how to explain this? It's a game of going to the same bits as other people, trying to be on different spaces, and trying to do a bit of engine building. And finally, Doric and I stayed around for a bit of so I solo tested Doric's dungeon delving card game, which was lovely. Now unless you have any other personal news that you want to share.
Sometime today, my latest Kickstarter cards should be arriving.
Ooh,
yeah,
that's very exciting.
That is very exciting. So the last Kickstarter was for greetings cards, and 2 of those are arriving today. The other one, because I'm actually trying a new printer, because the printer I previously went with has changed some of their card stocks, and unfortunately one of the ones they've got rid of is one of the ones that I wanted. So I've got 2 of them printed, which should be arriving today, and then I will see whether to go with them for printing the 3rd card, basically. So, but all very exciting, feeling very happy about that. So yeah, let's see what those actually look like when they arrive at some point today or tomorrow, hopefully.
And I guess we'll see that. We'll see pictures of that within the next fortnight.
Absolutely. There are some. Oh yes. You're going to the. Jess,
sorry.
New toys coming. Gotta love new toys. Toys are fun.
And I'm sorry if I'm skimming ahead.
No, go ahead.
So this is Inside the Box, who publisher of Subterra, and I'm going to call them they were meant to be the publisher of Subterra 2 and Aquanauts and my own Seize the Power game and Cryptex, lots of games, and Alba, lots of games that fell into problems. And to summarize, they've now publicly announced that they have gone into insolvency. And yeah, this is. I wasn't exactly aware of this, but I had personal communications with Peter, and we will obviously be getting the rights back, because whilst rights might be bought by a prospective buyer, then that is going to revert back to us because of contracts. But yeah, what is your thoughts on this?
Well, this is the sort of thing where you've got to preface it with, this is a sad story. So it's sad for the company, it's sad for the employees. It does. So I don't know to what extent this was mismanagement, because I wasn't there, but something has clearly gone wrong, and it hasn't been managed in the way that it should have been. There's a lot of anger. So in previous day jobs, etc., then I have done things such as redundancies, and I've done things such as, we had one charity, for example, which we broke down, and we sort of incorporated it with another charity, and we had to make someone redundant. And there are all sorts of things where things go wrong within organizations. This certainly hasn't been managed well. It is very sad for everybody. It must be incredibly infuriating for those who backed the things. So I backed the game book. So I was hoping to get Alba. I was hoping to get Alba. It looks like a great game book. Now I do have the digital downloads, but not the actual physical copy of the book, and so in terms of people losing money for games that they have backed, I got off lightly. But of course, you've got to admit that that is the point of Kickstarter. Kickstarter is about, it's not about pre-ordering a product that already exists, although some companies do use it for that. But they do have big disclaimers there saying you are giving money to somebody to make a product. There is a risk inherent in this, and so so it is obviously sad when that goes the wrong way. But but it happens. We've got to accept that as part of life. But I do feel incredibly sorry for those people who have worked for this company and who have been part of Inside the Box, and where it has just completely fallen apart. And it feels like it's been coming for a while. We've been hearing lots of things over the last 6 months or so about Inside the Box, and so I am not surprised, but of course it is all very sad. What does it feel like? Because of course you had your game there and you say you're getting the rights back, but how does it feel to have had a game accepted and to be talking about it with people, and then suddenly, oh no, actually that publisher isn't going to do it anymore because the publisher doesn't exist?
Honestly, I kind of, when they went into, let's call it hibernation, when everyone was laid off in, I think it was July, August, that was the point when I thought, okay, wow, this probably isn't happening. There's stuff seriously wrong. And I was contacted by one of the ex-employees around October who said that they felt bad for me because they knew that myself and Tiz were continuing to do lots of work on this game, and that employee knew that the company was possibly going to shut down soon, and they weren't saying anything to us, and so they felt bad about not communicating that. I understand where they're coming from, because it's not nice to hide that information and then realize, hey, this person's working on this game and developing it, and they're clearly putting a lot more love in than we are, and we're the publisher and we're meant to be the developers. And at the same time, we do have like the rights are ours, and it's something where the work that we did on it, it's not going to be all for nothing. It's going to be something that can improve the game if it gets picked up by someone else. At this stage, I've spoken to Tiz, and I mentioned this to Peter, where I said, yeah, we've decided that we will do a busy bargain bag version where you have to supply your own cubes and you have to supply your own money, and this is just a version 0.1. This is what we had last year for Now Play This, because that was a really good version, and I would love more people to play that, because so many people came to the London Festival and really loved it. And I would love it to be something that's not just in one place, but at least prints 100, and then after that, maybe some of them will get sold, and some of them hopefully will allow us to find a new publisher, whoever that might be, because it is a game where I believe it's important that the ethics of the publisher align with our own. And I know that Peter was really, I'm trying to work out what I can say publicly. And yeah, I'm going to say this. I know Peter didn't want to make anyone redundant when it went into 2020, but that was clearly the wrong decision for the company. I know that Peter, I believe, has a good heart. I know some people on Board Game Trading and Chat UK are accusing Peter of being a liar, blah, blah, blah. I think this is not any facts that I have as such, but I do have more, contacts than most. And I will say I believe Peter to be a good person. I believe them to be overly optimistic. I believe them to have possibly obviously they made some mistakes in the light of now the company's gone into liquidation, but I believe that it's also they were hoping that things would turn out well, and then they did have the pandemic and then thought it would be shorter than it was, and then other shipping problems which turned out to be worse than they were, and then people offered contracts that didn't quite pan out and that they pulled out from. So there was, if they had had more of a cushion, or if they had been more conservative, maybe they could have weathered the storm. But it was a storm, and yeah, some people are more, yeah.
I mean, this is the thing, because I don't know any of the individuals involved, but I do know that you can have people who have the very best intentions, but they don't manage to do what needs to be done. Sometimes in business you have to be very utilitarian, and there are some people who are less capable of doing that, who can't make the hard decisions. And I think the point you made about again, this is, different examples, but I've been in situations where you have to lay off a couple of people now in order to stop the entire organization falling apart, and it feels terrible. But sometimes, you just have to look at it and say, this is the reality that we're living in. Now, I don't know anything about this situation, for those sort of details, but sometimes people can be, there are three things when you're managing people. Just managing people and managing a business is different. But when you're managing people, you have to be clear, you have to be fair, and you have to be kind. And kindness actually is the least important of those sometimes, because you can't actually do a job properly without being clear. So yeah,
I know you've said this before, and I think that it's worth repeating that kindness is important in life, but clarity and fairness, even in your general life, are of paramount importance.
yeah.
And quick hello to Yoda. It's lovely to see you. I hope you're generally well. And we are just about to get into a brilliant thing. Brilliant thing. What's a little thing which is brilliant? I think that taps are brilliant.
You mean,
I mean,
plumbing into your house where you then get water coming out of a metal tube direct into your house?
It comes up, and like the water is down, and then it comes up through the plumbing. That's amazing, isn't it? It still boggles
Pressure
my
is
mind.
great. Pressure and gravity are brilliant things as well.
Pressure, that's a good one. I mean, just
Pressure
being
is
able to apply pressure to hold things, pressure to kind of put slight pressure on someone's face so you kind of know they're there. Sometimes a little bit, I mean, when we say pressure, people might think of immense pressure, but just a tiny touch, just to be like, yeah, I'm there. The pressure of a lips on your cheek, the pressure of, the wood grains against your fingers.
Yeah. Pressure is an interesting one because so what we're actually touching is we're actually touching the gravitational relations in all of these things. The amount of matter in matter is tiny. Hence why black holes exist, etc. But yeah, you're the pressure of one set of things against another. It's very interesting. Now I'm going to go all into metaphysics. I'll stop there.
And cake is also brilliant, sure.
Yay!
I'll agree with that. And cooking and baking. But yeah, so we were talking about things that you should do and working this out. And I think it goes into what you said about clarity, fairness, and kindness. And let's be honest, sometimes the thing that you think, okay, this is the nicest thing to do. I want to be kind. I want to be good to others. I want to be, but it is important to be kind to yourself, to I mean, yeah, then we get into the should it have continued. But
Mm.
look, what should you do is all relative. And I think to work out what you should do, you need to work out maybe what your objective is. Do you think that's a fair thing to say?
Yeah. Where do you want to end up? What's your actual goal here? And what what are the superfluous steps that you can drop on your way to the goal? There's an advert I keep seeing on Twitter and Facebook or somewhere, which is about reducing the unnecessary words in a sentence. I can't remember what the advert's for. It's for some technical solution. I don't think
Anyway, it
it's
doesn't
Grammarly.
matter.
Maybe it is. But it's yeah.
We don't need to repeat
We
that
don't need
for
to know.
10 days.
Yeah. But it's all about, taking out, the unnecessary words in a sentence. And I'm like, oh, okay. What are the unnecessary steps which you might be adding in to your how do you get to your end goal? Because I'm sure there probably are some.
And it feels like where do we want to go and what's the best way to get there? But when we say I want to have made this game, there's lots of stuff that we don't say in that process. I mean, maybe I want to make this game, but I still want to maintain my own personal health. I still maybe want to maintain my ability to care for my children. Maybe I still want to be able to do maybe I've got another job. I mean, I'm lucky
Yeah.
that I don't have, but like whatever. And there's a lot of things that are left unsaid when you say, I want to do this. When you say, I want to get fit, you might say that, but it's not at the expense of everything else. Again, it's, I want to get fit. And then how much time are you really willing to expend on this? How much are you willing to change your diet? How much? Because presumably you're only willing to sacrifice certain amounts of pleasures. Are you willing to eat no interesting foods that you enjoy from now on? Or yeah, like what brings you pleasure? What makes life worth living to you? Because clearly being fit or making a game or whatever it is important to you. But what are the other things that you actually prioritize?
Most things cost a fair amount of time. Things also cost money, but for a lot of people then it is actually time, and something like going for a run might not cost you any money, but if you have to get up earlier in the morning, can you actually do that? Can you fit it in around the other things that you're doing? It's all of those sort of considerations. So yeah, it's absolutely about, prioritizing where do you want to get to, and how are you going to get there, and how is that important in your life? Because nothing is done in a vacuum, just like you were saying, what are the other priorities you have? Because we've all got competing priorities.
Now, it's difficult to do this, but one exercise that maybe I should do more officially, if you know what I mean, is to kind of imagine myself in the future and think, how would I like my life to be at this point realistically? I mean, at UK Games Expo, I would like to have finished Categorical. I would like to have sent that out. I would like to have published and delivered my other outstanding Kickstarters. I would also like to have a couple of new games to release at UK Games Expo. I would also like to be at a certain level of fitness. I would also like to still have maintained a certain level of relationships with my friends and those people in my life. And I would like to have made a certain number of memories between now and then. And it's maybe nice to say, okay, where do I want to be there? And then work back. And I do this in a very vague, meandering way. But do you think that's something that I should properly sit down for half an hour or an hour and meditate on? Does that seem like a worthwhile thing? Or is that, again, just a form of procrastination from actually just drawing the stuff?
See, that is different for everybody. So there definitely seems to be half a dozen different methods that people use for working out what they really want to do. You know, and some people it is sitting down and doing it. For other people, then it's writing things down, you know, writing down on a list, maybe drawing little diagrams. You know, for other people, then it's talking to somebody. So I think what any individual needs to do probably relates to how they approach the world and how they learn things best. You know, what's their normal window onto the world? See, I know, for example, that if somebody says something to me, if I get told something, you know, through voices, ears, audio, it does not work. My ears are not connected to my memory. Just completely like zero link there. So I need to write it down. You know, I can't just. I mean, yeah, sure. You know, some things I can remember, but if somebody says to me, "Oh yes, you know, we've got a meeting next week" or something, then I'm like, okay, you know, if I don't write it down now, then I'm just not going to remember it. So for me, having loads and loads of little bits of paper, which then feel a bit messy and I should organize them a bit better, but it's definitely the right sort of approach. So yeah, I think what I'm saying really is that you've got to work out what vague approach works for you, you know, what sort of direction of approach works, and then try to fit in more of that. So for some people, it might be talking to people. You know, it might be that really helps, and that helps me. Well, it's not just that one method helps one person, and that's it. You know, people can have various different methods. You know,
Oh,
I
yes.
find,
And
yeah,
for all the talk about are you a visual learner, are you an active learner? I mean,
yeah,
people respond well to learning in a multitude of ways all at once. And I think there's research being done that has been done that sort of debunked that slightly,
mm,
that said that for most people, you actually want a variety of learning styles packed into one. And
mm,
it's similar for planning and prioritization and willpower, that you don't necessarily want one thing all the time. Even once you've made the system, on a different day, you kind of might want to go back to the other thing and say, okay, does this work?
yeah. It's like, you know, it's like having. So I think most things are a bit of a balance. You know, it's like having a certain number of foods. You know, you might say, okay, you know, I like eating, salad, and I like eating, you know, pie, and I like eating, you know, cake and things. But I think that it's very much some people definitely have preferences, you know, and so yes, you know, it's got to be, you know, you might say, okay, you are, you know, so I might say that I am, you know, that I'm only 10% learning stuff through sound. You know, some goes in, but then the amount to which it's visual versus actually doing it probably varies day to day. And there are days when I'm like, no, I just need to read about it. And then there are days where it's like, okay, somebody needs to show me it. But yeah, completely different styles.
And sometimes, even if, like Black Sheep here, you're a visual
Mm,
learner, sometimes you want to be shown, sometimes you want diagrams. And of course, even if you're dyslexic, actually doing the thing is
mm,
a way to cement in that information. So, to talk about what we should do, like in my mind, I'm going to say that there are often relatively simple, short tasks that I know, okay, this would be good to do, like sorting out the prepayment, the deposit for the hotel. Oh, by the way, for my leaving party, if anyone's unaware and wants to join me, it's on 11th, 12th, and 13th of August. Please put that into your diary if you haven't already. But yes,
it's in
I've
the
got it
diary.
sorted out. It's a hotel in Milton Keynes. It's not the cheapest hotel for everyone to be at. I do apologize. You can stay elsewhere, but now I've made the payment. We will have the room. I've got to make another payment closer to the time for the remainder of the money. But it's something that I would have liked to do before, to sign the contract and send off the money, just to finish it, to say, okay, now I've done that. Now we can start focusing on what's going to happen. yeah, there's going to be a lot of board games, but there'll also be some physical games, like some moving around mega party games. There'll be maybe a bit. Mike Nods might run a disco. Will we have cake? I don't know. I'm not planning on supplying cake, but if people want to bring cake, then you know, I would. I would. Hmm,
Would you
I would.
encourage cake?
I would judge a cake competition. It, I will announce a cake competition so people can bring cake and someone will be crowned the winner. I'm not sure what the prize will be, but there will definitely be like at least a little certificate, which might just be a little doodle that I've drawn on a bit of paper to say you are the Bezzy cake champion. No, the Bezzy baking, the brilliant Bezzy baker, the brilliantest Bezzy baker.
I think that an actual crown would be good. Like a paper one.
I mean, no, the prize can't be some cake. The cake should be shared amongst everyone. I mean, clearly, come on. But yeah, yeah. I, but the point is that I had all this stuff that I felt like, okay, I have to do, but I'm just putting it off, even though when I get to it, it doesn't take that much time.
Mm.
Why? And I procrastinate. Why is that? What's the science behind it? Why is my mind just avoiding the thing and thinking, oh, I need to do that, and then I avoid doing it, and then I realize, oh, I need to make the thing for the router for aircon, and I want to do that, and I say I'll do it next week, but then a week passes and I don't do it, and then one of my volunteers reminds me. I do it the same day. I do spend a lot longer than I felt it was because I'm trying to put everyone's needs together and make sure everyone's as happy as possible. And I've got someone always there with me, but it feels yeah, it then I'm like, okay, this is the first draft. If anyone's unhappy with this, let me know. Then everyone's like, yeah, that's fine. But why did it take me so long to just start doing that?
It's just, I find that too sometimes, Sometimes it's just that I like sitting around and doing nothing sometimes. There are definitely days when it is harder to get going on things. You know, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that are sort of, 5 things, and none of them are huge things, but they're all sort of a little bit multi-layered. For example, I've got to send off the copy of Library Labyrinth we have. We're putting it in for the Games Expo Awards, which means I actually need
Oh
to
wow!
send off the copy of that. So I filled in the form, but I wanted to take a couple of pictures before it went, and so I've been looking outside, going, "Oh, is it nice enough day?" The deadline is the 15th of March.
Thank you.
So it's fine. Fine-ish, but it means I actually need to do it fairly soon. I can't just procrastinate forever because otherwise I'll miss the deadline, and then that'll be really sad because it'll be like, I wanted to do that. So, yeah.
Sometimes I think that is it about being perfectionists? Is it about great being the enemy of just getting something done? Because I know sometimes that's the way it is in my mind. And I was talking about this yesterday on my stream when I was just cutting out cards for half an hour. And I said, look, I'm cutting out these cards on bits of paper and they're not great to play with bits of paper. Then you actually physically need to put cards on top of them so you don't see through underneath. But it's playable, and the couple of minutes extra that it takes you during a game is less than the extra time it would take me to do a whole nicer prototype. And I know that next week I'll be making a whole new card pool with all the information that I've gathered so far. And honestly, I might be making a card pool tomorrow if it wasn't for the fact that, yeah, Kerry had taken a bunch of cards home, so I'll be learning a bit more about it next week. So I'm going to wait on that before doing the next iteration.
Sometimes it's that for me. I mean, yeah, quite often it is that for me, that it is a bit of perfectionism. But actually, the thing that comes up most is probably the desire to be efficient, then forgetting to do it. So, for example, so I have meant to buy another sum up machine, you know, the little card machines
Oh
that you have.
yes.
So we actually can't find ours. We know that it's somewhere. So, you know, we're going to buy another one because we were thinking that it might be useful to have another one anyway, you know, one for me and one for Mill, you know, fine. You know, so we were going to, you know, we're going to do that. But I've been putting off doing it because my credit card is downstairs, and if I use the PayPal account, then I need to work out, you know, that goes to a different phone to my phone. It goes to Oliver's phone because he's the treasurer for that. And so it's all a bit, you know, so there's a little bit of, okay, maybe I should just do it. But I want to be efficient and do it when I've got something else to pay for at the same time and everything. And then, of course, it doesn't happen. Uh, so that's a so that's not quite perfectionism, but it's a similar kind of feeling. You know, you want to do things which are similar together. The other reason I think is just because I am sometimes just don't feel like doing a certain thing.
And you say that as if, I mean, some people could hear that and think, okay, why not? What's up with you? Just get your act together. But I think it's important to note it's not just about the time. Energy is a resource. Now, there's a lot of different types of energy, and it's interesting how, you know, if you run, sure, eventually you'll get physically tired, but that doesn't mean you're mentally tired or sleepy tired. And I used to say to an ex, like when we were like tired because they would it was just to analyze how each other was feeling because, and it was through conversations with them that it's like, oh, actually, when someone says I'm tired, does that mean I'm bored? Does it mean that I'm emotionally exhausted? Does it mean that I'm physically tired of doing, of running or using my muscles or whatever? Does it mean that I'm mentally exhausted and I just can't think anymore and I just need to vegetate?
Yeah.
Or does it mean
It's
that I need some sleep?
Yeah, it's different sorts of tired. And, you know, and I think, you know, particularly when you've got different types of things, you can get very bored of tired of certain things. Yes, you need to be in the right frame of mind to do some sorts of work. So
I would
there
say
are
not
times,
only the
yeah.
right frame of mind, but also have the right energy about you
Mm,
and have the, because energy is a resource and it's not just one dimensional energy like a single bloop, 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 bloop. It's like these multiple different types of energy, like a million different meters, and each
mm,
meter is going up and down, and this one can affect that one, and actually doing a physical run might lower this but then
mm.
increase that.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, personally, I find that the days when I do get out and do a run in the morning, which is a very short run, you know, I go running for about 15 minutes. You know, I basically
Still a
just go, you know,
run.
round the block. Yeah, exactly. You know, so the days when I manage to do that, which is about half the time, then I get more done that day. You know, because I feel more, you know, more energetic and things. But I think, you know, you're absolutely right. There's different types of energy. So, you know, so there are days when I'm like, okay, yes, now is the time I can really focus down on something. And sometimes that's really creative stuff. Sometimes that is doing the accounts. You know, I've got two big spreadsheets I need to do. You know, two of my things on here are basically spreadsheets. You know, one is getting together all of the data to send to the US fulfillment hub for Library Labyrinth. So that's the US and Canada. It's about 500 backers, you know, and I need to basically put together the whole lot of data and just send it over to them and say, okay, here it is. And, you know, and I need to pull that off the pledge manager. But then there are some people who have changed their address in Kickstarter, but not in Game Found. And there are a couple of people who emailed me and said, I can't work out how to do this. And I'm like, don't worry, I'll do it. You know, so there's that. And it's not going to take that long, but there's going to be a lot of little fiddly bits and making sure that when I've pulled off data, it's in the right format, etc., and double checking, you know, because I want to make sure everything's right. You know, and then I've got my accounts to do as well, which is always fun. Everyone loves putting things in spreadsheet, right?
I mean, with you, I feel like you might actually.
There are days when I do really like that, and I do, so I do like sitting there and setting a budget for something, setting the initial budget and going, oh, okay, so if that costs about that, and if this is this, then how many of those, and I do really enjoy that initial budget setting and, working out things on a spreadsheet type thing.
Mm-mm.
But I'm not that keen on when it comes to having to keep updating the spreadsheet. That I'm less, that's less fun. So give me the data at the end. Give me all the data at the end and be like, oh, how much have we spent on this versus this? And oh, that's interesting. We've spent X amount on things I loosely class as post. Because if it's not just the postal stuff, but it's the envelopes and the etc. Well, that is interesting. I like it.
I mean, this feels like I'm absolving myself of responsibility, but I did find that when I had Chris helping me out once a week, they were working 2 days a week for me, and one day they'd work at home, one day for here, and then if I had stuff to scan, they'd scan it in and do the on the day that they spent at home, that they were basically in charge of the LDIC Twitter and doing marketing and stuff. But it felt like coming here, making the games, I had to have all the arts ready. So I had to make that decision and then I had to stick to it. So by being a good boss to them, I was also kind of being a good boss to myself, if you know what I mean. Which was
It's
interesting.
really hard to be a boss to yourself. It's really hard. I mean, that's part of the job of a good manager, to make sure that that you're managing the work, and it's really difficult to do that with yourself.
And yeah, like Mike just wants to say, by the way, it is nice to see when the formulas work and you get all the info at the end. But sometimes it's a fight to get it working, and I totally get that. But spreadsheets are actually really useful, because without spreadsheets and talking about brilliant things, I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's Google or Open Office or whatever, but just being able to do sums and change numbers and see the results immediately, rather than having to do it all in my head, just to check, okay, I'm going to change this rota and I'm going to check how many half hours everyone's working, and I'm going to put a number at the bottom to make sure how many people are on the stand at any given time. I mean, sure, I could shift things around and then each time spend an extra couple of seconds working it out, but that would make the whole process so much longer. But yeah, back to the point that I was making, having someone around to say that I am beholden to say, yeah, I need to get this stuff done for them, that's really helpful for me. And not only someone who says, okay, I will do this for you in the next week, absolutely fine, but someone who says, I'm doing it now, and so I know, okay, I have to get it done like by then, and I might be doing it like the hour before, still, but it will get done by then. I will get it done in time for them. And I want to share a short bit of potential joy, which is in the past couple of weeks, I met someone we'd been chatting on WhatsApp because they were interested in coming to the playtest group, and then we met, and then we had then they came over and we played games, and then we kind of ended up having a sort of date on Saturday, which was lovely. And then it was all very chaste and very sweet. And the plan was for them to come over on Thursday, tomorrow. And they told me, hey, how would you feel about me coming and doing homework there? And I said, oh, I thought, well, that's a bit weird, because we'd kind of talked about going off and doing something touristy, and then they said, oh, because I've got this possible interview and I need to check out the stuff. And then I said, okay, and then afterwards they said, look, I'm maybe not being direct enough. I really have to get this homework done, and I would like to do it at your place if that's okay. And I feel happy that they're comfortable enough to tell me that. And I said, you know what? It would be lovely to spend time with you, even if we're doing our own thing. Obviously, we'll chat together for some of it, but having someone over is almost like a dream come true. And I'm not going to say like, yeah, but so that's a really lovely thing. And then maybe
Exciting.
that'll be pressure on me to be like, okay, what do I actually need to do? Like maybe I need to now, while they're there, start on my letter shapes for categorical. Well, I say start on the final letter shapes because I've done the potentially final ones before, but yeah, I'll do the final ones, just the drawings, and then do the coloring in after because I'm doing all the drawings, then all the coloring in, and then yeah, but get everything prepared today so I can do it. And it's also about setting yourself up for success. Like if I don't have 26 pages of nice paper on which to actually 31 about 37 pages of nice paper on which to draw, then that will be a barrier to me doing it. And that's like a really small thing. That could mean that, okay, today I cycle 20 minutes to an art shop, buy some paper, and 20 minutes back. And I just buy it. And I'm like, don't worry about being the most efficient with the price. Just get it done. Just buy the thing. Because it's not going to be more than £20 difference in terms of my art. Well, it might be, but it's not going to be more than £100 difference in terms of my art supplies, in terms of all the pens and paper that I buy for this. It's, yeah, I'm willing to spend slightly over the odds in order to just get it done. And it's that thing of you don't need to be efficient, but yes, when other people are around, that's going to make me do the thing, but get stuff set up so that then I do actually do the thing when they're around. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It sounds exciting. It sounds cute.
Thank you. And we are going to go for a walk around the park as well, which I'm looking forward to, and see the roses.
Very nice.
I've not seen the roses for quite a few months. I hope they're actually in bloom. I mean,
it's a bit early for most roses, but the thing is that there are so many different types of rose that
I mean, it's a professional park. They've hopefully got roses that are there. We'll see the park anyway.
There are Christmas roses and there are really early roses.
Anyway, but my point is just yeah.
It'll be fun. It'll be fun.
I don't want people to think, oh, going on a date with Bez is all about Bez getting you to give her emotional support. It's not all about that. I just want to clarify. Kind of more having fun things together. Anyway, going for walks, and thank you very much, Mike. That's lovely of you to say. What are there any things that has worked out well for you that you want to bring up? Or any stories of things that you've heard have worked out well for others, and you think, oh, maybe that doesn't work out well for me, but it might work out well for Bez or Joe or Mike or Rhoda or Ali.
One thing I heard that other people do, which I haven't done myself because I think I'm too much, got to be in the right frame of mind. But some people do quite carefully segment their week, and they say, okay, I'm only going to do these sorts of tasks on a Monday, but I've got to get them all done. And then I'm going to do these sorts of tasks on a Tuesday, but I've got to get them all done. And so there are people who do that. And it's the same thing with people who say, okay, I've got the next 3 hours and I've got to do X amount of stuff. I mean, personally, for me, that doesn't work so well because I can't necessarily tell what I'm going to want to do. And I've found that going against what I want to do doesn't really work that well. I'm not that able to override it. But I do find that, that having a list of things which you've got to do works really well. You've seen my various lists. There's another various list. So the bits which have got the bits which are filled in, so basically there's a little square next to each, and the square gets filled in the more I do the thing. And that works quite well because it allows me to indicate that I've started something. So it's
No,
all
it's
good.
a really nice system of having those
Mm.
squares and partially filling it in, and it works well for you. And I think that square actually, is that public? There's nothing private on there, I assume. Are you willing to show it a bit more?
There's nothing private on there. There's nothing private on there.
So the whole idea is that, like that half-filled square, you've done a bit, so you feel the satisfaction of that.
Yeah, you can see how much accounts I've done.
10,
A tiny bit of account.
10 top
Yeah.
BBB website.
Text. So that's the Green Games website,
Okay.
which is coming out. Yeah, so the Green Games Guide is something I'm part of, and that's coming out next week. So there's a little bit of, well, the inevitable last minute scrabbling around saying, oh, are we doing this bit or that bit, and and the writing of press releases and all of those sorts of things. So
that sounds
lots of fun.
awesome, and I look forward to chatting all about that in a couple of weeks, because I'd seen it on Twitter and it seems like a great initiative, but I didn't know that you were involved.
I am
until
indeed
this morning.
involved. Mainly, I am writing the press release.
And Joseph Kelly says, that's a really good idea. I tend to find lists helpful but overwhelming, but that looks like a good solution. And yeah, one thing that I've started doing, which in terms of lists, that I haven't done today yet, I need to do my list and I need to do my pills still, but my normal morning activities, because yeah, I was kind of up late, I'm not going to lie. The last guest, because their game wasn't play tested and they only wanted to solo test, so I suggested they stick around. But anyway, I've got to sort of about 5 people on Facebook who've agreed to look at my to-do lists, and I put up a friends only post saying, hey, who would be willing to look at my thing and potentially give me some encouragement. So there's a few people that I know quite well, and then I said sure, and a couple of people that I know less well but are welcome to look at my to-do list. I don't get super personal, and sometimes I just use an initial of a person. But I find saying I'm going to do this in that morning quite tricky, and I find I'm going to say, no matter how long it takes, and I regret this thing in myself, that I had a daily calendar, a daily sort of visual diary where I drew out basically every hour of every day. And I would, every so often, when I had 30 seconds of downtime, I would just scribble in what I've done since the last time I've scribbled in the diary. So I would scribble in, okay, this is the exact time, and this is what I've done. So it would also be while I'm working. If I'm ever tired, I'd say, okay, well, I'm stopping working at this point, so I'm kind of drawing this line to say I've stopped at this point, and then dot, dot, dot to say paused, and then another line to say I continued at this point. So I had my own shorthand, and it was a sibling who said at some point to me, you're spending so much time examining your life, it feels like you're not living your life. And that motivated me to move away from it. But at the same time, it was working for me. And even if it did eat up like half an hour, even if it ate up an hour of my day, that feels like a worthwhile expenditure to make sure that the rest of my day was more structured, to make sure that I had things. And digital calendars I found so useful, because digital calendars, you can tweak them, you can move things around.
Yeah.
And a calendar on my computer, which is synced to my phone, it's the best thing ever. And I find that so useful. But in terms of, okay, this is what I want to do, just get to visuals idea of this is going to be 2 hours, therefore I draw it in 2 rectangles, and this is going to take about 5 hours, therefore I draw it in 5 rectangles. And it helped me visually understand the way that the day was. And, I don't think I've flash this up, but yeah, Joe appreciates your list solution, Jess.
Yay!
And
Different people do definitely find different things, and I took that from a friend of mine I used to work with, who had, who basically had a big notebook and, and had, lists of things in there, and I thought that is a brilliant system. So yeah, people who are quite, people who like things to be quite visual, or yeah, it's such a personal thing. Different things work differently for different people.
now we've been chatting an hour, but if you've
Mm.
got some tiny bits of time, is there anything else that you want to say? Anything that hasn't worked that you'd like to steer away from people? Or is there anything you want to say before we start moving on from the topic?
No, I think, well, actually, I think just one thing, which is that one of the things we haven't touched on has been how much time people need to get into doing something. When we're looking at prioritizing things. So I have a friend who's a children's author, and we have children about the same age. And she is one of the only people I've ever met who likes having small blocks of time.
Ooh.
So I find that I need at least half an hour, if not an hour, to kind of, to slowly get into a working state, if that makes sense. So I need to look at emails and, faff around a bit. And, and that's why actually social media is quite useful for me, because I do Descent Games social media, and then I'm like, oh yes, now I'm feeling Descent Gamesy, because I've done some faffing, but it's the right sort of faffing. But anyway, my friend who's the children's author was really happy saying, okay, I'm going to a coffee shop and I'm going to write, and I'm going to write for an hour, or I'm only going to, do this for, 3/4 of an hour. And I'm thinking, wow, does not work. I need quite a lot of time to, to get myself in the zone. And clearly not everybody does.
That's interesting. Like, I have to admit, when it comes to generating prototypes or getting stuff made for Friday daytime playtests, I do, and people who frequent the Friday daytime playtests will know this, always do things last minute. Well, they won't all know this, but
now you're telling them. It's always last minute, people.
Yeah, I never start before Thursday evening. And it'll typically be on Friday after I shower. And so I'll shower, and then I'll have the final working out of, okay, this is what I'm definitely doing today. And then I'll make it. And some days I will know, okay, this is going to take me quite a chunk of time. Like last week when I made an entire card pool for my deck construction game. And so I woke up at 6:30 to shower and then get it all done before cycling off at 9 o'clock. And that felt a lot more achievable than spending Thursday doing it. And I guess I am addicted to that pressure, which is not a good state of affairs. But yeah, I'm addicted to be like, yeah, I managed to do it. I managed to do it just in the nick of time, and then cycle over there. And yeah. And there's been times when I've cycled over, worked out what the game is going to be, and then drawn on some cards between 10 and 11, which 10 is when we're arriving and 11 is when the playtesting starts. So we do chat, and I will engage in the chat, although I'll admit if there's a new person, I'm not able to give them as much attention as I'd like if I'm also prototyping at the same time. But it's a way of doing things. And David Brain sometimes said, oh, you've not really come to Friday playtests unless you've seen Bez prototyping last minute.
Excellent. That group, how many of you are there normally?
I would say 8 to 12.
Okay. Is that a so you told me at some point about a South Bank group. Is that
That's the same
that
thing.
The group?
In
Okay.
Waterloo. Yeah,
Okay,
so
excellent.
it's every Friday. I mean, we've moved from South Bank Centre to National Theatre just because, yeah.
It's not that far though, is it?
It's literally 2 minutes walk.
Round the corner.
If you walk briskly.
Yeah. Excellent.
But
Well, at some point I might go to that, because I have not gone to very many physical playtests for a long time. I tend to do my playtesting on Monday and Thursday evenings with the virtual playtesting group online on Discord. But I should actually get some physical prototypes together at some point. There are a couple of
absolutely.
games I'm thinking of which are more party game-ish, and actually might suit much better to that kind of physical group, because it's very difficult to do things which feel a bit more party game-ish. It's very difficult to do them on Tabletop Simulator.
Absolutely, and I think even when it's a more strategic game, I
Mhm.
think that it's so much more valuable, in my opinion, to see how people interact in real life around the
Mm,
table, because that's what I want to design for. I
mm,
know that there have been a couple of games which have been tested 100% virtually, which I slightly mistrust, if I'm going to be honest, because
mm.
there's all, that's an extreme example. There are all sorts of things with like shuffling, which is
Yeah.
takes negligible time digitally,
Mm.
but is actually a bit of a faff each time you do it in real life.
Yeah.
Converse, and that's an extreme example, but there's all sorts of smaller things and things that might be a joy in real life where you can see around the table, but then, and I'm not saying you can't make a good game, but by just testing it virtually and then putting it to the physical
Mm.
space. But I am saying that I think you potentially miss something.
You need both. I mean, you really need both. When I'm thinking about, playtests I've done, it definitely works best when you physically got people doing some sitting around there. Conventions are really good. People
Can
are
I
often
just
very happy
challenge,
to do these.
when you say
Yeah,
you need both, do you mean that you need the digital thing? Because I'm not convinced on that.
I would say that I need both. And what I find most useful about the digital thing tends to be when I go to the virtual playtesting group, then I get a lot of very targeted feedback and very sort of quite academic feedback, because
Mm-mm.
because I'm playing with people who are there deliberately to look at a particular game, and so they've come there to criticize. Now that doesn't mean that the game is right for them, and I found that actually some of those groups are not particularly good for co-op games, because they're thinking of because they're working in a different way to the average person almost. And so it can be, some things can be a little bit skewed, but I think that personally I really need that careful feedback in the early stages. Would I be looking for people to do online playtesting? Yeah, always looking for people to do online playtesting. Can you, I'm just trying to think, theoretically I have a Discord somewhere, do I actually do that? No. I
Um,
mean, genuinely, yeah.
Mike could contact you on
Twitter.
Twitter.
Twitter is probably the best thing. I mean, personally, I tend to do my playtesting with a virtual playtesting group, which I would recommend to everybody because it's the group that I like and the group I feel most comfortable in. Mainly because they have a big spreadsheet which tells you clearly which game is going next, and I
Mhm.
really like that clarity. So, spreadsheets.
If you do come to Friday daytime
Hmm.
playtesting, we make the chart at the start of the day. You'll be delighted to
Grand.
hear.
Hey, in that case, I am in. Yeah.
So as long as you reciprocate fully, so the rule is if you stay for the full
Mm,
day, we will try our utmost to make sure you get a table with you and two
yeah.
other people, because then that makes it fair. You
Exactly.
spend 2 slots playing other people's things, 2 people spend a slot playtesting yours. It's, in terms of people hours, it's all the same.
What's the what's the length of a day?
It's from 10 a.m. until 4:45. And if you want to stay longer, um, well, that's when the 10
Mhm,
o'clock, we start gathering and we chat.
mhm,
And then 11 o'clock, we start playtesting a game. 11 o'clock sharp, I should say. So if you're there like
mhm.
later than 10:57, will be a bit grumpy. Um, and then that continues until at least 12:30, at which point people are free to take a break, go to the loo, get some food, do whatever, and then there's half an hour break. Then another 90 minutes of playtesting, then another half an hour break, then another 90 minutes of playtesting. And so I think the half an hour break, even though that's not traditionally baked into most playtesting groups, I think it's really important because then we get to have those side discussions. We get to socialize, we get to decompress. And I think that it means that the last game is getting people who are still relatively fresh, as opposed to being exhausted by being bombarded with non-stop gaming. Because if you are learning stuff, it can be tiring.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That sounds like a very good structured system. I do like something where I know what's coming. I like something where it's all clear what's expected. So yeah, I mean that sounds great, and really that is something where I should make an effort to come down one of these Fridays, because it's
And I was
not
about to
that
say,
far.
if you're seeing a bit extra, typically one or more of us will bring some published games, not of our own, so that at the end it's like, hey, we've done a bunch of playtesting, but we are also people who enjoy games. So let's
Yay!
try out these brand new games that are unplayed games, and we try to play different things each week for the sake of seeing what's out there. And it's all honestly started as a way of me saying, well, I've got lots of games I need to play and get rid of before I move. So
Cool.
please, everyone, allow me to just bring stuff and get stuff played. And so then, if people want to hang around for a couple of hours afterwards, Mike asks, what if it's a longer or a shorter game? Well, typically 90 minutes works well as a slot. If someone's got a longer game, then I would say that either you say we are going to play test one turn of this game. If it's the kind of game where one turn takes an hour and the game is going to take 4 turns, for example, I don't know, but if it's a 4 hour game, then playtest the start of it and then do half an hour of feedback. Even that can be of use. If you really feel like you need to get a full game done, we did have in the past a game called Butterfly Wars, which took maybe 2.5 hours. And so what Matthew Puffett did, the designer of that, was they didn't get to playtest every week that they came, but when it was possible, like they came for 1 week and then didn't playtest, and then roughly every other week we would say, okay, these two people are going to go there for 2 entire slots and playtest Matthew Puffett's game. If you've got a shorter game, I would say typically it's actually, you can take advantage of that. If you feel like, hey, I've got Kitty Cataclysm thrived in a 90-minute slot, because I could say, hey, this is a quick game, takes about 5 to 10 minutes. Let's just
You can
play it.
playtest a couple of different scenarios. You can go through
No,
and go,
we playtest it 10 times, and then at the end be like, okay, what now? Let's actually delve into the balance of these cards.
But I was wondering whether, did you, for example, take the chance to say, can we play it once with these rules and then a second time with slightly different rules?
You could. It's down to what the designer wants. It's down to, and if someone is actually saying, you know what, I'm only working on one game, like Ellie Dix and myself will often say, okay, we've got 3 games and we'll play all of them if we've got time, but if we don't, then we'll play these. And someone else might say, you know what, I've got this one game, it'll definitely fit within half a slot. And so you can share a slot if that's, potentially.
No, that sounds fine.
We will make it work, Mike. I mean, if you want to come over, then you are welcome as well.
I will do that sometime. Yeah.
I mean, you've already said you will. I was encouraging Mike and all the viewers to
Everyone
come. Yeah, I mean, if we had 20 people, then it might be slightly problematic just because we don't want to take over the space. It is technically a public space. But yeah, it's a lovely place. And I mean, when I'm in Thailand, sure, you can come over. I was meaning come over to London playtesting. But we've chatted for so long. It's been a lovely chat. And Yeah, at this point, I think that rather than ramble on as we absolutely could do, we could
Mhm.
just sit here and chat the full day away, I think, you and I.
We could, but we have things to do. See, I've got a
Yeah.
whole list of things I've still got left to do. I have to buy envelopes. I have to get the text on the website. I have to buy a new sum up machine. All of those things.
Jess, I feel like I've asked you a couple of questions, maybe more than a couple. And
Yeah.
do you have a question at this point to ask me and everyone else who's watching? Question of the day. Question of the day. Here's a little question before we go on our way.
I think. I'm just thinking. Okay, here's a question. What's your fave cake? No, let's not go with that. Although that is a good question. The question I actually have is when you've got a smallish card game, do you like so if you've got a card game, are we
Kitty
thinking
Cataclysm?
Kitty Cataclysm?
Yay.
Do you prefer, in a very vague sense, to have a small number of cards, like an 18 card game where perhaps you have to keep moving the cards around, or do you like to have something where it feels like you've got loads of cards and you're putting them onto each other, or do you like something where you have to reuse things, or something where it feels like you've got an abundance of things?
Interesting. So you're not giving us the middle option. You're ignored the option of having 54 cards. That's right out. You're saying, would you rather have a small 18 card thing, or would you rather have
rather have
the
120? 120 versus.
Oh, that doesn't feel like an abundance.
Okay.
I was imagining like 300 or
maybe. Yeah.
I would say typically for the experience at the table, I do find that I enjoy an abundance more often, where it's like, oh wow, look at all these things. That's quite exciting. Especially if it's a party game and I want all the content, you need that content.
Yeah.
Especially and I'm thinking that the 18 cards games do feel generally more like a puzzle. I feel like the 18 cards games also are more transportable. I'm happier having them in my possession. I don't have to have if we're talking about like 300 cards, like that's a bigger box.
But even if it's I'm just thinking, even if it's not 300 cards, something like Bandido, for example.
Okay, sure.
So the bandits escaping from the middle of then you've got to block off all of the passageways. You could have so that's a version where you put down all the cards, and there aren't loads of cards. I mean,
I
there
think
probably
there's about 54. Yeah,
I think there are probably maybe a bit more. But when you've got them all out on the table, it looks like a lot. When you've got them all out on the table, it looks like a lot. Whereas, you could have something where, you could easily play a tunnel game of some sort where you're having to move tunnels. I mean, maybe tunnels doesn't make much sense, but if it was a game about shifting sands, and they weren't tunnels, but they were sandbanks, you could easily have a game with the same sort of principles where you've only got 18 and you have to keep moving them around. So I like your idea that it feels more like a puzzle when it's a smaller number of cards. I think it does. Something like Sprawlopolis feels more like a puzzle, doesn't it, rather than a
I mean, the horrible answer, I mean, the cop-out answer is, of course, it depends.
It depends on the game, yeah.
I think that given the choice between 18 and 120, honestly, it's still not going to take up that much space. And if we were talking about even more sprawling, like 500 cards, then it would be a different answer. I think in the choice between 18 and 500, I would go for the game with fewer cards. But if it's a choice between a game with 18 and reuse them, and even though I'm having maybe more agency and more planning potential, I think I would rather the tactile satisfaction of having all the stuff out with yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Mike says multi-use cards can give you both. Like, there's still a limit on how many cards you've got. I mean, we're not talking about how many options you've got. We're talking about, like, that's a completely separate question. Like, in my
Next time.
deck construction game, like, there's one deck of cards in the card pool, but I've not been telling you how many ways that these cards are being used. And yeah, a pentagon shape would give you so many options, says Black Sheep.
Hexagon, I think you mean, actually.
Well,
Pentagons need squares with them as well, like on a football.
Like they don't tessellate, I think is what.
No,
Yeah, hexagons
that's the
do
word.
tessellate
No,
nicely,
they
but
do.
I feel like it depends. Like, are you putting these down on a map? If you're just using them out of your hand, then you don't need all the options to be one on each side. That's not even necessarily a good arrangement. I think that sure you can go the Glory to Rome style of having something on the top, slide it down, something on the left, something on the right, maybe some, but you can have an innate discard this for a resource. And this card has 3 options listed in vertical alignment, and you just get to see all these things, and then you choose one of them. That's a completely reasonable thing to do. But multi-use cards, obviously I love them, but back to the question, I'm going to go with, if someone said, how many would you like to have? I would say 120 probably. And
Okay. Sort of double pack size. Yeah.
And Mike is suggesting tessellate pentagons with bits you can't use, so you're kind of getting in each other's way. I mean, that feels like a game that's really about the tessellation. And I will say that with weird shaped cards, even though this has been suggested to me in the past, they're awkward to hold, let's be honest.
Personally, I do love tiles where you're tessellating things. I do love having
tiles.
but that is a different thing. And and the bits you can't use with tiles, that can also be quite fun. Particularly when you get that bit in Carcassonne and you're like, hardly anybody can go there. That's an almost impossible space. I quite like it when that happens.
And Jota talks about building a house of cards. Henry, over to you. What's right up to you? Can share Potsy if you want to. I'm going to, honestly, the first things that I'm going to do are pills, write down my to-do list, and today is going to be a day of going out as I do every other. Actually, I just realised that it generally lines up with the Wednesdays when I see you. But I'm going to actually go out today. I'm feeling a bit better, thankfully, than last week. And then make sure that I've got stuff in place to do some work tomorrow. So, and also I need to set up tomorrow's stream. So, tomorrow I'm chatting with Steve D, who's about small footprints games. But is there anything that you want to share? Something you need to do, something you have to do? Please share. I promise I care.
I'm sending Library Labyrinth off to Games Expo. Plus, I also need to buy some envelopes and I need to do a little bit of drawing for things. So I've got a lot of very sort of, very basic things to do.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about a recap and wrap up before we finish up. So today we talked about cake and getting new cards, deck construction game, Ticket to Ride New York, and Inside the Box going into liquidation. We talked about how it's important to be clear firstly and then fair, and only then, once you've done both of these things, to focus on being kind. And we talked a little bit about, yes, it's great to be kind, and I think that Peter is a good person, but in striving to be kind, they were kind of ended up being. Anyway, we talked about pressure being a brilliant thing, sending water through taps, but also loving pressure and the pressure and like touching things. It's like the sensory excitement of pressure should like being about where do you want to go, and it's all about what's the best way to get to somewhere. And think about not just the I want to make this game or don't be too single-minded when you think about where you want to be. Remember all the holistic things of you want to have your health. You want to still be someone who engages the world with the world in some degree, someone who engages with your friends around you, maybe. I mean, if you want to be a hermit, no judgments here, but that's not the life for me. It's about what you prioritize.
Can't imagine Bez as a hermit.
I mean, yeah, I was going to say do a charity thing as a hermit, but then no. I mean, why make people do really horrible things for charity? I'm not up for that. We thought, yeah, time, it all takes time, but when you run and you go for a quick 15-minute run, it energizes your whole day and you get
Yeah.
more done. About sleep, about the different types of being tired physically, mentally, emotionally, sleepy, envisaging the future, writing on paper might help. Perfectionism might get in your way. Energy is a resource. Maybe do something where you say, I'm going to work on this thing, but only during this time, like only during that day, or only for these 3 hours. And that might work for you. Or conversely, like Jess, you might need to go a little bit more with the flow. Maybe you make boxes and then you half fill the boxes that you've half done. And then you fill in the boxes when you finished, and that makes it feel nicer. Maybe you do a visual diary like myself where you have 24 boxes every day and then you kind of draw it out like a comic. Sometimes faffing, if it's the right sort of faffing, as Jess said, it can actually be productive. We talked for quite a while about Friday daytime playtests, and Jess says that both types of playtests, digital and physical, are useful. I mean, for myself, I've found negligible value in digital playtests, is the truth. I mean, I've definitely found value in them, but I've never found anything that I couldn't get from a physical playtest. I mean, the availability is a big thing, but that to me it just means that I could do the same thing, but maybe a bit slower if I do it physically. Um, we talked about, yeah, how many cards would you like? And Mike mentioned that for them, carrot cake is the best cake. Now, that's basically been the entire recap. Thank you very much, Mike, for those well wishes. If you want to check me out, I will, of course, stuff by Bez in all of the places, Twitter, Instagram. I've not posted on Instagram for quite a while. I need to, yeah, Twitch, YouTube, stuffbybez.com/discord will redirect you to my Discord. And if you want to find out what I'm chatting about in the next few days, go to stuffbybez.com/streams. How about you, Jess? Where would you like people to find you?
Generally, I am best found on Twitter. So, Descent Games, that's the best Twitter handle. And you could also go to descentgames.com. You could go to librarylabyrinth.com to see what's happening on Library Labyrinth. That's another thing for my list, which I actually need to write down and do another update for Library Labyrinth, because I've done the Kickstarter updates, but not necessarily on the website. So I just need to copy that over. And yeah, but come find me on Twitter because that's where I hang out most.
Nice. Just putting that into a proper banner. There we go. So those are all those things. And at this point, I just want to say thank you very much, everyone, for joining this conversation. Thank you, Jess, for being, yeah, this is a kind of conversation that I don't think you can really just talk out loud yourself for. I mean, it really benefits from being a real conversation with two people on the camera, and I love having these chats. Thank you very much.
Yay, me too. This is lots of fun. I enjoy my Wednesday mornings.
Excellent. And please, everyone, share, spread the word. For now, there's only one thing left to say, which is, of course, bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, bye, everyone.